So sometimes we hear that ACC, because we're so sui generis with our ACC scheme, that looking at comparative models in other common law jurisdictions may not be as useful because they're not a direct comparative.
No, they're not. I mean, who wants to go back to litigation all the time? It's a terrible process to resolve the no-fault thing, but it was for motor car accidents, other accidents, workplace accidents, and it has been broken into by workplace health and safety. That's one piece of legislation where you can now get compensation if you're killed, for example, forestry worker. You can actually seek compensation from the courts under that legislation, even though there's ACC. So there are, ways you can go in, and I would definitely suggest that there could be some way that people who had been subject to the type of abuse that we see here could have their claims looked at, particularly the earnings-related aspect of them, because they're left with almost nothing apart from caps on counselling and this, I forget what it's called, but this tiny payment to make up for the fact that you can never work again.
Ms Joychild, ACC is one component of support that's really required. Was there any other thoughts from your clientele around the overall package and around lifelong support?
Well, I mean, one client who suffered very severe reactions to the ECT, he has pains through his whole body, and he said to me, I would just love to have a physiotherapy treatment every 2 weeks. My body's just aching all over. He's in his 60s. So rehabilitation, each person will have a different need for rehabilitation. And it's very commendable. I forward his thing on to the wellbeing team, and they have arranged for him to have massages. And that's
through the Royal Commission?
Yes, through the Royal Commission. And really, the Royal Commission is the model in lots of ways for what this new body would look like. It's made a tremendous, just a tremendous improvement already for a lot of people who have engaged with it. In terms of being heard, and in terms of the counselling and the massage, the kindness. Leonie spoke of her tremendous feeling of being welcomed, and it's the opposite of what happened to her as a child when she came in and she had her separate room as a witness to be in, and cups of tea and food. All that was tremendously important. On the subject of Leonie, there's one point that she wanted me to say. She wanted to make it very clear when my friend spoke to you this morning about further communications outside the Commission. This is at Leonie's instigation. She is asked to speak personally with the 2 Crown lawyers to let them know personally the impact of their treatment on her. So it was an initiative that she has taken. I'm aware it's very late, so...
No, but we'll go to the end because it's important that we hear from you without interruption, and you've not got too much further to
No, no. So this new body, which would take over the work, it would operate in a treaty partnership model in terms of representation kawa and tikanga Māori, and that's particularly in recognition of the very large number of Māori children. I believe it's about 50% who were in Lake Alice. But the body be authorised to reopen past settlements. The government accept the systemic nature of the abuse of children in care and provide realistic compensation that will have a meaningful positive impact on the present day life of the survivor and whānau, and acknowledge the grave wrong that has been done to them. And finally, it's submitted that the Commission call for a public process or event for the making of a national apology from the Crown to the survivors of abuse in state care that can be witnessed and understood by the nation. Among other matters, the apology would recognise the abuse was disproportionately done to Māori children and young persons. That invokes breaches of the Crown obligations under the treaty, in addition to the breaches that had already been done to Māori, which caused a lot of these children to end up in care in the first place. That the wrong that was done to these young people not only damaged their lives, but the lives of their whānau, and it sometimes became a wrong done to others that has criminal justice ramifications. It would also recognise the losses that many survivors live with today in their mental and emotional health, ability to earn a good living, and loss of ability to enjoy the human rights that were guaranteed to them as citizens and residents of Aotearoa, New Zealand. In this way, the government would make an opportunity for the nation to gain some wider understanding of the extreme hurt and damage that was done to many in state care, including all of those at the Lake Alice Adolescent Unit, and to understand much more of the context of broken families, crime and dysfunction in recent decades and now.
And those three elements that you've just referred to, broken families, crime and dysfunction, you say are as a consequence in part, at least in part, of the abuse suffered by people.
Most definitely. And that has been said time and again. One of the men who joined the mongrel mob said to me, we had to. We came out of state care terrified of authority, terrified of the police. We got together to protect ourselves, to look after each other and protect ourselves from the state. That was his reason why he ended up in the mongrel mob.
And I think we've heard evidence to that effect at the contextual hearing as well.
Right. But of course for Māori, the crime dysfunction has much longer history.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Joychild. I'm going to ask, follow the following procedure. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have anything to ask you. And then, because of the nature of your submissions, and that's not meant to be critical, but I think even you accept that you strayed into areas of evidence from the bar and the like, which is permissible. I'm going to ask Ms. Aldred if she would like to in any way make any comments on that. So first I'll invite my colleagues. Mr. Lofewa, do you wish to ask any questions of Ms. Joychild?
No, not at this point.
Can I just ask quickly the process that you recommend that we establish? You don't mention any process leading up to that in terms of engagement with affected people, including survivors. Would that be part of that?
Most
process?
definitely. Yeah. Most definitely. How they want the apology given is critical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Obviously.
And I have no other questions. So thank you very much, Ms. Joychild. Ms. Aldred, I give you this opportunity, as I've said, because of the many of the things that were said in these submissions, which I feel you may wish to comment on or reserve your position. I'm not sure what you want to do about that.
I think I would probably like to reserve the Crown's position, possibly to file something brief in writing. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of things that I've picked up as we have gone. One of them, just because it surprised me, was the suggestion that there are only 35 civil legal aid providers. We've just checked and there are substantially more than that.
Who do more than, I think it's 4 cases a year. There was a number of cases. Sorry, I didn't...
Well, look, let's not have a discussion about it. I think Ms. Aldred's idea is a good one.
Yes.
If you wish to answer any of those matters, put them in writing, show them to Ms. Joychild, and then submit them, and that would be... I mean, I'm not asking you to reach agreement, but I think that might be a process that would at least give the Crown an opportunity to answer some of those matters.
Yes, we may or may not take the opportunity, but I'll certainly confirm with Council Assistant.
And you'll need time to consider that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to the close of the proceedings. I'm going to invite my colleagues to address the gathering and the people who are watching.
Ms. Joychild, it was very fitting that actually we ended with your submissions because you spoke very powerfully on behalf of the survivors that you represent, but we have a saying at the Commission that N doesn't equal 1. So although you might have just referred to 1 and a few others, in actual fact what we have come to really appreciate and understand is that there are significantly hundreds, thousands of more that sit behind that have had the courage to come forward. And so in that respect, I really want to mihi in particular to our survivors, Ms McEnroe, I see you here, Mr Whiffen, the White brothers and the others. I don't want to get into naming all of them, but I see that we've had your Lake Ellis survivors as well here, Mr Zenfeld. For the courage, because really in many ways you're the forerunners. You're coming forward and you're being prepared to stand before the Commission, before the public, in a very open and naked way, to see, for the world really, to see what happened to you and the processes that you had to endure and go through. And it's really on that note I want to also then turn to Count Sal, Ms Aldred, you and your team there, Mr Clark Parker and Ms White, and of course to our own stellar team, for the humane way in which you really took care in presenting and leading your witnesses and cross-examining. And in Samoan, in my own language, we have a saying, it's a phrase, "Whawhetai mo le whatamali'i o winga matu." And what it means is, we really want to thank you for the honour that you brought to the processes in the way you held yourselves and you conducted yourselves, and the honour that you extended to each other, both in the witness box, in our hearing space, because it's such a room filled with tension. Emotions run very, very high in this room. And it takes me back to when our building was blessed by Ngāti Whātua some months ago. And it's a real privilege for us that they are our anchor, that they're our stronghold. Because one of the taonga that they left with us was in the words that they blessed the building with. And they said that they wanted everyone who came into this space, irrespective of whatever title you hold, to bring your whole self into the space, because in actual fact you impact the wairua of the room. And that the wairua that you are bringing would hopefully be a healing balm for someone else who was in the room. And so there is a measure that always goes on in this space, but the overriding prayer for them, for us, was that this would indeed be a healing space. So a space where we might see redemption, a space where we would hear and be able to take on board hard things. And I think I say on behalf of my colleagues that even though you see the three of us here today, our other two commissioners and the team that sit behind our executive director really want to work in an open and transparent way, because we're actually aiming to achieve our own mission statements. How do we transform how we care for our young people and be able to influence our nation? So it's really on that note that I want to thank you all. It's been a long, hard 3 weeks, but I think it's one in which you'll all agree that notwithstanding how gruelling it has been and painstaking, and for some I hope that they would have found a measure of joy and peace in what was said. But the responsibility, of course, will fall back to the Commission in terms of the gift that we're able to give back to the nation in terms of what we've heard. So the weight of that work is not lost on us, and our gratitude is extended to all of yous, because what we're sensing is a genuine offering of wanting to pull together in a new direction for what's gone on, for our claimants, for our survivors, in historical claims, but more importantly, actually how does this impact the wider work of our state and our nation going forward. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Commissioner Irawiti.
Tēnā koe, ko tai mai mātou ki te mutunga o tō tātou hui. Tēnei te anei mātou, I te wānanga tuatahi, tēnei te pūtake, ka piki atu mātou, ki te tihi o te maunga, ki te kimi hia mātou, te whakapono, te tikanga, te mana, e te ana ki a mihi ki a koutou katoa, ko te mihi tuatahi ki te tangata whenua o tēnei rohi. Ngāti whātua ora kei, e mihi ana ki a koutou, ngā mihi nui ki ngā roia, o te kraunga, o te komihana, o Miss McEnroe, ko Miss Joychild, ngā mōrehu, ngā kaiwhakahaere o te komihana, me ngā kaiwhakaatu, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora koutou, I just want to say some thank yous. I want to acknowledge mihi, the survivors first, for their patience and waiting for this inquiry. I know it's been a difficult time for many, and I want to acknowledge that and their support for our mahi. I was heartened too to hear from Ms. Aldred about her experience in working with council, a sense of mutual respect and working together, I think is very critical for this work because of the difficult material that we're working with. As my colleague just mentioned, it's important for the mana of this inquiry and all attached to it that we work together and respect one another and recognise one another's mana. I also want to just acknowledge too that, or recognise too that the kaupapa here is redress, and it's the redress offered by the state. And the reason why we've had this hearing is because clearly it was a high priority for survivors that we address this issue, a long-standing issue. And it's also for us, state redress is a matter of the honour of the Crown and the mana of the Crown. And it's essential that the Crown be here and speak to its experiences and acknowledge its wrongs and shortcomings as we've heard, and that more can be done. And we've seen parallels drawn between the redress schemes that have been offered to date and the historical claims process through the Waitangi Tribunal. And I think that's a good comparison to make. While not perfect, the Waitangi Tribunal process has allowed us to grow as a nation. It's played an important part of healing for not just for Māori, but for all of us as citizens of this country. And I think also with what we've been hearing about over the last 3 or 5 weeks, and we'll hear more next year, a lot of it's hard, it goes to your core, it will rock us, but it's so essential, I think, as New Zealanders for us to move forward as a nation, to heal and to grow, to go through this process. So I want to thank you all for your participation, and particularly the survivors and those who gave evidence over the past 5 weeks. And I look forward to working with you all as we move forward with our further hearings, private sessions and wānanga. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Kia ora. I do no more than adopt the sentiments of my colleagues, and on a more prosaic note, and maybe one that people are anxious to know about, where do we go to as a result of this hearing? We are in the middle of finalising the interim report that is required under our terms of reference to be delivered by the end of the year. That we have held that interim report so that we can include in it a chapter which records, at least on a preliminary basis, this hearing. That will be a summary of what we've heard. It will be a pointer to future directions. It will not be the full case study or full report with full recommendations, because we simply can't do that in the number of days that we have. But there will be reference in our interim report to this hearing and some preliminary findings. In the new year, we will be embarking on a series of roundtables and consultations to discuss and learn from our stakeholders and experts about the issues that have been raised in this hearing. And you will have heard many times people saying, well, this is a matter that we will discuss later, and it's that process that we will undertake. As a result of that process, with further research and consultation, we will then be in a position to write a full report of this hearing with full conclusions, full findings, and with recommendations for the future. I can't give any promises. It would be unwise of me to make any predictions about when. I can say that we are all as anxious as anybody that it does not delayed, but it's got to be a full and thorough report because it will be an important report on what has happened over the last 4 months. So that is where we're going. I just end on this note, which I will state in English and then repeat in Māori. If we right the wrongs of the past, we can go well into the future. Ki te tika a muri, ka pai ki mua. Nō reira, huri noa ki tō tātou nei whare, tēnā koutou katoa. E te rangatira, kei a koe te wā, mō te karakia.
Me tū mō te karakia, mutunga me te waiata. Please stand for the closing prayer and song.